Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from wealthmanagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of wealthmanagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest definitely counts on that score. His name is Ryan Marcus. He's the Chief Business Development and Engagement Officer at Binah Capital. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Diana. This is going to be fun.
And so I know today is actually a very important day. It's Ryan's birthday. So I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday, from me and all of us here at wealthmanagement.com. I know this is going to air, months after your birthday, but, I won't ask how old you're turning, even though I have a feeling it's younger than me. But, any plans for your birthday? Any special plans?
So first of all, thank you very much. I try not to make that big of a deal for my birthday, but this past weekend, my wife and my two kids took me out to my absolute favorite restaurant down the shore in New Jersey. So today we're probably just going to do a little light celebration. I'll have my in-laws over. We'll have some banana cream pie, which is my preferred cake, and they'll sing happy birthday. By the way, it's 46. I've come to terms with it, but just a little light celebration this evening. But thank you very much.
Yeah, I feel like, when you have kids, it kind of becomes more about their birthdays, and I tend to take the focus off myself as well. But, on a serious note, Ryan is here to discuss an issue that's very near and dear to his heart. I can see he's very passionate about it. He's been writing a lot about this on LinkedIn and on other publications. And that is the neurodivergent community and how the wealth management industry is serving this community. And because today it's almost non-existent how the industry is serving that community, or, at least Ryan argues the industry is not serving them in a particularly intentional way. And so neurodivergence, just refers to divergence in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. It's frequently used with reference to autistic spectrum disorders. But this is kind of a little bit of a personal issue for Ryan because his nephew is on the spectrum. And so I just wanted to read a little bit from what Ryan recently wrote in Wealth Solutions Report. I have a young relative in his early 20s, a remarkable human being who was born with Asperger's. Like many in his situation, he stands to inherit substantial wealth. In conversations with him, I was struck by the fact that the services he receives through state programs have never included any form of financial literacy education. Even more concerning, I could not imagine him walking into a traditional wealth management office and feeling comfortable or understood in the same way a neurotypical client might. The experience of a conventional advisory meeting, bright fluorescent lighting, background music, phones ringing, unpredictable interruptions, unfamiliar seating arrangements, strong cologne or coffee aromas, and the expectation of sustained eye contact can be profoundly overwhelming. So, Ryan, I just want to start by, tell me a little bit about how, what it was your experience first getting to know your nephew, and what were some of kind of your first interactions with him?
Sure. So thanks, Diana. So I had the benefit of meeting my nephew not at birth. So when I got together with my current partner and met my nephew for the first time, he was already 12 years old. And I'll never forget the first time that I met him was actually the first time that I met my entire wife's extended family. So we had been dating for several months. And, there was this big buildup about meeting the parents and her siblings and some extended family. We went to a restaurant deep in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, because that's where my wife is. And I remember walking into the restaurant, feeling that mix of excitement and nerves you get before, meeting the whole family for the first time. And, upon my 12-year-old nephew walking in at that juncture, I noticed that he was wearing what looked to be just regular headphones. Didn't really think much of it. After meeting my future in-laws and going through the platitudes of introductions, I actually walked up to Nicholas, is his name. And without knowing anything yet, I leaned over and asked, "So what kind of music are you listening to?" At that time, I had no idea that he had Asperger's. He didn't respond to me initially. And ironically, we ended up sitting next to each other in that dinner. And one of the first things I noticed about him, and what you'll notice most about those that are neurodivergent, is they all have their own unique, gentle disposition. My nephew specifically, maybe at this point now is 22 and may be 6'5" and close to 300 pounds, but his eyes are probably the most gentle that I've ever seen. And after exchanging a few smiles and, he quietly put his headphones back and got back to his dinner. When I think back about it, it was very simple, right? There wasn't anything overly interesting, but it was the very beginning of what has become a very special connection between he and I. And that's something that I look back at very fondly.
Yeah. And so, as you got to know him, what did you kind of learn about Asperger's and people on the spectrum?
Yeah. Well, in short, Diana, I think it's really about the fact that it isn't really about limitations, right? I actually think having Asperger's or being neurodivergent, whether it be autism, ADHD, and several others on the spectrum, it's really about the differences as to how someone experiences the world. My nephew taught me that a connection doesn't always have to look like a long conversation or having sustained eye contact, right? Sometimes it's just being with a person that you care about or that you care for, sharing a meal, or just being present. What I also realized is that people on the spectrum have this beautiful way of just being completely authentic. There's no pretense. There's no social mask. What you see is what you get. And the honesty, sometimes that can be a little hurtful, hey, do you want to hang out? No, not really. Or would you like to do something? Nah, not today. That honesty I've come to really admire. My nephew may process, and others, of course, may process the world differently, but in many ways, the way in which folks on the spectrum or that are neurodivergent experience the world is just more purely. And that's a gift that I didn't really know that I needed until I had the pleasure and benefit of meeting and playing a part in his life.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure that you and your family have kind of become a lot more comfortable, and he has become a lot more comfortable being around you. So, kind of, what's your experience, personal experience with him now? How do you and your family interact with him? I know that you have kids of your own, and obviously that's their cousin, and you all are a part of each other's lives.
Yeah, it's actually a really beautiful thing to witness. Although each and every time I'm with my nephew, whether it be at his house or he's at ours, and we try to get together as much as all of our calendars permit, because he's not sitting home and doing nothing. He's probably busier than most neurotypical adults. But when we are together, it's really about just letting him be himself, right? So whether it be that he decides that he wants to pace throughout our house. He has a tendency, and it's quite cute. As he's pacing, he kind of skips a little bit, and you'll notice his legs have become like tree trunks because he's walking on his tippy toes as he's skipping. But as he's engaging with my family, it's a beautiful thing to observe. My daughter, who's 16 years old and is going to be a senior in high school, when he's in her presence, one of the things that seemingly is soothing to Nicholas is to be able to put his hands in to stroke, her hair, right? So it doesn't make her feel uncomfortable. She's quite used to it at this point. She's got straight hair, and the feeling or the smoothness of her hair seems to be relaxing to him. So it's quite beautiful to see him putting his hands through her hair and caressing it very gently. It took some getting used to in being, the newest member of the family, so to speak, but it's a beautiful thing to observe. I think of my father-in-law, who is about the same size as Nicholas currently. And, he's a big, gaping Sicilian-born man that came to America when he was 13. You see him holding hands with Nicholas. You see, Nicholas kind of tickling the inside of his hand because that sensation is relaxing. So it's quite a beautiful thing. And to us, it's normal. We are cognizant or sensitive to any extraneous noise or surprises. We try to mitigate that as much as possible. But for us, we wouldn't really have it any other way.
Yeah, I think this is just really helpful for me and for listeners, because I don't have a lot of experience with people on the spectrum. I don't have anyone really close to me that's on the spectrum. So I don't know. This is just really helpful in understanding how they interact, how they feel comfortable. And, because sometimes like things that are different, people that are different, can be a little bit off-putting, but it's really shouldn't be. And so it's just really helpful in kind of understanding where they're coming from. And what kind of adjustments have you made, at your house or in your life or just in your interactions with him to make him feel more comfortable around you and your kids?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that I always try and do, just because, Nicholas himself does not lead a neurotypical life and sees through a different lens than my kids do, is always trying to be inclusive. So anytime we're going anywhere, in the event that destination is not going to give him any anxiety, we always try to be inclusive. I'm always, to his dissatisfaction sometime, asking him questions about school and what he's doing. So just getting him involved and being genuinely curious myself. So that's something that I'm always attempting to do. As far as preparations are concerned, we have a couple of dogs. Those dogs typically tend to bark. And although Nicholas at his own home has a couple dogs, when he's not as familiar with ours as he is with his, we just make sure that, the dogs aren't overacting on anything, that we keep their barking to a minimum. If they are barking, that they're not barking at his direction, because that can typically tend to make that nervous. To make him nervous, we always ensure that, when we're eating, that he has food that he likes and that he enjoys, that we're not just eating this, typical food that might not be inclusive. So it really doesn't take much, Diana, but what it does take is ensuring that just because Nick sees things through different lenses, that he doesn't feel any different, right? So we actually try and not make it overtly obvious that we're being over accommodating, because to him, his world is perfectly normal and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Well, I just want to bring in some stats here, because this is not this is not a particularly rare disorder or anything. It's, 15 to 20% of the world's population is neurodivergent. So that's, 1 in 5 people. That includes autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and other dysfunctions. Even Tourette's syndrome is a neurodivergent condition. So that's a lot of people. And, it was just a recent estimate by the CDC in 2022 suggests 1 in 31 children in the US are diagnosed with autism, which is about 3.2%.
Yeah.
But in the US, this rate is higher among boys, with approximately 1 in 20 boys diagnosed compared to about 1 in 100 girls. And I was kind of just reading up on, financial wellness for the neurodivergent community. And I came across this a platform called Nudge, which is a global financial education platform. And they say that these conditions influence how individuals process information, make decisions, and manage daily tasks, including financial responsibilities, meaning that neurodiverse individuals are more likely to face bigger challenges when it comes to their financial well-being. So here are some of the specific financial obstacles that neurodivergent individuals may encounter: difficulty processing complex financial information, increased vulnerability to financial struggles with budgeting and organization, inconsistent income and employment barriers. And so, that to me is, that just kind of calls out the need for financial advice, right? And I know that this is something that you are really passionate about, Ryan, and working on. But like when you think about your nephew, what are some of the concerns around your nephew and his financial picture?
Yeah, well, look, my nephew isn't the only young adult that stands to inherit a significant amount of wealth over the next 10 or 15 years, right? As the data shows, Gen X and millennials are going to inherit $22 trillion in the next 10 years or so. Right? If you apply the theory of numbers that you talked about a little bit earlier, that's 3.3 to 4.4 or so trillion dollars will be inherited by neurodivergent individuals in the next decade. As I think about my nephew, sure, ensuring that someone that serves within the wealth management community can ensure that my nephew has the proper planning in place, whether that be, trust and estate planning, whether that be, keeping his investments safe and that things are being done correctly based on his time horizon. That's all wonderful. But as you mentioned before, Diana, my nephew and many others would not be able to step foot in a traditional wealth management office. Historically, staff isn't adequately trained to be able to engage with neurodivergent individuals. It could be everything from the lighting to the smells to the sound is just sensory overload. And, if they're not going to have the proper equipment or a pacing track to be able to alleviate some of that anxiety or cut the meeting times down, to gamify a lot of the complex charts and deliverables that are often given, it's going to be quite a challenge. And, what I find really interesting and at the same time frustrating is that, as the wealth management industry has continued to evolve over the last 10 or 15 years pretty rapidly, there are financial professionals that focus exclusively in the medical community, right? Serving dentists, medical doctors, and other type of medical professionals. There are wealth management firms that focus exclusively on the pilot community, on the pharmaceutical industry, but you rarely hear that there are wealth management firms that have the training, the resources, the knowledge, and the ability to execute to service the neurodivergent. And I have great concern for my nephew. He himself has a lot of planning to do and currently does not have the professional resources in place to be able to ensure his survivability and his financial well-being. And I'm really passionate about challenging financial professionals within the wealth management space to be able to focus on that, not just because it's the greatest opportunity, I believe, in the next 10 or 15 years for wealth management, but it's also the right thing to do. And that, as you can tell, I'm clearly very, very passionate about making sure that my nephew is well taken care of and well served amongst the millions and millions of other folks that also are deserving of that standard of care.
Yeah, I think it points to a larger issue in the financial advice space in serving this community. I mean, I know, you see a lot of firms focused on special needs clients, and there's some specialty there. But, I think those are more focused on the families of people with special needs, right? They're not necessarily serving those individuals.
Yeah. What I'll refer to it as secondary or tertiary services, right? So the primary client might be a neurotypical individual. That neurotypical individual may very well have a family member, right, where, the wealth manager is doing that as an accommodation or because the primary client is asking for assistance. However, a lot of, at some point that neurotypical person will no longer be around to care for that neurodivergent individual. And people are going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable at first and getting trained and understanding how the neurodivergent mind works and adopt their practice to be able to not just accommodate, but to serve that community very well. And that's the challenge that I see, is that this industry is not rampant with training and teaching individuals how to professionalize their services to accommodate more than one client type. They're able to break that into different segments, right? High net worth, ultra high net worth, elderly, but they're not learning what they need to in order to serve a very large part of the market that historically has been underserved and continues to be underserved into, 2026.
Yeah. I mean, what are some of the programs that you think this industry needs to adopt to serve that community?
Sure. So first of all, there are some really great programs, both public and private, that have training curriculums that wealth management firms can mandate their staff to go through, right? Just like a CFP, training and exam before designation. There are training programs that will educate the typical staff member, whether it be an ops person that's engaging and interacting with neurodivergent individuals and clients, whether it be wealth managers. I think that's going to be tantamount to the success of any type of program. And a lot of the additional elements, Diana, to focus on being able to serve the neurodivergent community, a lot of it's just common sense, right? So as you think of the impact and the sensations and, quite frankly, the overstimulation, once you understand what that overstimulation might feel like or where that may come from in the neurodivergent community, it's a pretty simple fix, right? So it's not having these incredibly bright, shiny lights coming from, different hi-hats. It's not having an office that's entrenched with, perfume or scents coming out of the HVAC system. It's not, delivering a report that's 20 or 30 pages with complex financial graphs and delivering a financial plan, perhaps, gamification or gamifying that process. It's not about a 2-hour meeting every quarter reviewing, a report cover to cover, maybe breaking that up into 15-minute or 20-minute segments, whether it be in person or online. Having a track or, getting some decal stickers for the neurodivergent individuals that may want to pace either before, during, or after a meeting so that they can release some of that overstimulation and get rid of some anxiety. Having access to a noise canceling headphones or a quiet room so that they're not hearing exterior conversations or anything that's happening within a professional environment. Those are relatively common sense fixes that most advisors or most principals of wealth management firms can resolve within a couple weeks if they chose to. Right. So I think the more complex issue is the training and getting folks comfortable in working with and dealing with things that may not make sense to them, but make complete sense and perfect sense to their neurodivergent client. once you have that applied in practice, right, and professionalize it, the tangible and the physical changes, they're relatively easy to fix, but that's always going to be a work in progress. And I've stepped into thousands of RIAs across the country. I've never stepped into one that is adequately prepared to focus on someone like my nephew being comfortable in that environment.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't sound like it's that difficult. You just have to make a few tweaks, and you can make that environment a little more comfortable. I don't want it to seem like I think you have all the answers, but how can advisors reach those types of clients? Should they market themselves specifically to them? Should they find them through existing clients? Or I guess, how can we kind of find a match here between those two?
Yeah. Well, I'd say yes, all the above, right? But, at the end of the day, authenticity matters. So my suggestion, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but first and foremost is don't market inclusion just to win the business. Yes, wealth management businesses are in business specifically to serve clients well and to make money. I get it. But make the serving the neurodivergent community and being inclusive as part of the firm's identity, right? And it's as simple as starting by having intentional conversations with existing clients, right? Many of them, as you stated earlier, Diana, have neurodivergent children, siblings, or loved ones, right? Then thinking about forming some type of an alliance with a school, neurodiverse or neurodiversity educations, and local support groups. I think if advisors spent a portion of their time doing that, they'll be surprised not only how receptive communities are when it feels like someone genuinely wants to help, but word spreads pretty fast when people feel like they're seen. And a lot of these folks go through life feeling like no one really cares enough to make them feel seen. So I think it really starts with your day-to-day, right? Ensuring that, you're being inclusive and being genuine because it's the right thing to do. That alone will help win new business, and anything that you do above and beyond that just going to be great.
Yeah. And I know that you or your wife is looking at launching a nonprofit to create financial literacy programs for people on the spectrum, and that's wonderful. Have you guys taken any steps to help your nephew get proper financial advice or education or anything like that?
Yeah, well, look, I think we've started at least to lay the groundwork, right? Right now, it's about exposure and comfort, right? So I think by introducing simple financial concepts that make sense to him visually and through real world examples, I think, that's a good foundation for him. But, I think at some point in the very near future, we'll be speaking with advisors that are open, to learning how to adapt to the neurodivergent community, right? At the end of the day, ultimately, our goal is to create a safe space to where he feels respected and not overwhelmed, right? That's what good advice should feel like, especially for someone who processes the world a little bit differently. I don't think it's going to be a Herculean task to find someone that is open to changing the way in which they look at their client base, right? Within regards to my wife wanting to open up a nonprofit, she's also in the process of doing that. And look, I find financial literacy and wealth management to be two very different things. Wealth management is taking the long-term needs of a client, no matter how old they are, and ensuring that they do not outlive their money and that they're financially sound and stable, and that their funds or inheritance or wealth is invested adequately based on their risk tolerance so that they live a comfortable life with whatever it is that they have. Financial literacy starts in the classroom. And what I find amazing, and it may not necessarily apply to my nephew Nicholas, but it certainly does to other neurodivergent kids that I met, is that, some of these kids or adults for that matter can recite every historical fact known to mankind, can apply quantum theory. They can teach courses on and educate some really smart people, including professors in colleges. What I find really interesting, but at the same time sad, but more scary, is that, there are folks that can walk into a convenience store, take a lollipop off the shelf, and if the individual at the cash register tells them that the lollipop costs $30, they won't know the difference, right? They won't know that a lollipop should cost 30 cents, certainly not $30. Mm-hmm. And I know my wife is really passionate about bringing financial literacy and educational concepts that are hyper-focused on the neurodivergent community so that they start early in their application of understanding what money means, how it works, what is currency, right? How are financial theories applied, and general things like how to open up a bank account and to balance a checkbook, right? What is a debit card? How do you protect yourself from all of these scams that even the neurotypical community fall for? So that's what my wife is really passionate about. And at this point, she's working on a full curriculum that she can then gift out to educational programs and schools, because they too also are inadequately prepared to handle the volume of neurodivergent students that they're facing. So we're both really passionate about what we do, just in a different application.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's a very worthwhile endeavor. Well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time. Ryan, I could talk about this all day with you. I'd like to thank my guest, Ryan Marcus, for being on the podcast, and just really thankful, Ryan, for the work you're doing with the neurodivergent community, and really admire, the message that you have and the work that you're doing to bring awareness to this.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Diana. It's always fun to speak with you. There's no thanks needed. When you love something, you're willing to give everything you have towards that endeavor. And this is something that certainly comes from the heart. And any way that I can help, I'm certainly willing to give that effort. So thanks for having me and bringing awareness to the larger community. And, certainly look forward to talking with you again soon.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan's a great friend. So Ryan, just thank you so much again. If you'd like to reach out to Ryan, if you have any questions about what he's doing or about the neurodivergent community, you can do so by emailing him at ryan.marcus@binahcap.com. And we'll put this in the show notes as well. But if you have a struggle yourself and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of wealthmanagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.